Thanks for joining us on today's webinar, a technical demo of digital rights management for Siemens Teamcenter. My name is Norv Leong, the Senior Director of Product Marketing here at NexLabs, and before we get started, I wanted to get a few housekeeping items out of the way first. All the lines have been muted, but feel free to submit questions via the Q&A or the chat box that you see on your screen. We've actually set aside some time to answer questions at the tail end of the webinar, time permitting. And then secondly, this webinar is being recorded, so we'll send you a link to the recording within a day or two. So with that, let's get started. Chris, if you want to just go to the next slide.
Yes, I'm trying to. There we go.
Oh, there you go. So this is a little sneak peek at what we'll be covering today. We'll kick it off with a short intro on NexLabs, who we are, what we do, and then we'll follow it up with some key customer challenges that we're seeing in the marketplace with respect to Teamcenter. So this will segue nicely into a demo of our Teamcenter DRM solution, which is the meat and potatoes of this particular webinar. The demo will be given by my colleague, Chris Kanan. And as I said, time permitting, and I think we will have time, we'll answer questions that get submitted during the course of the webinar. So without further ado, let's dive into this. Next slide, Chris. Just starting off with some background info on NexLabs. We were founded about 15 years ago. It's here in Silicon Valley, which we still count as our headquarters today. We've since expanded our offices to include the UK, France, Germany, Malaysia, Singapore, and China. Our customer list is a veritable who's who of the Fortune 500, spanning a number of industries, particularly aerospace and defense, manufacturing, financial services, pharma, among others. We've built a strong ecosystem of partners ranging from SAP, Siemens, Microsoft, Amazon, all the way to the large global systems integrators like Deloitte, Accenture, and Infosys. We've also partnered with organizations like NIST to help establish standards for technologies like dynamic authorization and attribute-based access control. So this deep expertise is reflected in our patent portfolio, as you can see, with over 60 awarded and probably another 30 or so pending. Next slide, please. Now, given the need to utilize data effectively to run a business, as many of you are probably aware, many organizations are faced with a common challenge. Now, how do I go about managing access to my business critical data while still keeping it secure and within compliance? Ultimately, customers, they got to reconcile their business objectives with their security and compliance mandates, the balancing act, if you will. So on the one hand, you've got the need to share information within a company or perhaps with suppliers or partners in order to get things done. Maybe you're part of a supply chain where you have to share design plans with upstream or downstream partners. Collaboration is the name of the game, but you have to balance that against protecting the crown jewels too. So you want to share only that part of the confidential data necessary for the task at hand. Slide. And it brings us to Teamcenter Digital Rights Management, or Teamcenter DRM for short. It's a solution that enables organizations to achieve that balancing act that I just talked about. So on the one hand, employees can access the areas they need to in Teamcenter, while on the other hand, they're still able to safeguard that data and to do so without falling out of compliance with applicable regulations, such as like export control regulations. Specifically, NexLabs helps secure Teamcenter data, enabling your employees to collaborate securely with coworkers, partners, suppliers. And because NexLabs automates much of the compliance and security management tasks, this results in much lower cost of administration and much more streamlined monitoring, auditing, and reporting, such as making sure you're in compliance with those export control regulations like ITAR that I just mentioned. So ultimately, at the end of the day, by streamlining security and compliance, you're able to enhance your business agility. You can respond more quickly to changes in market conditions, regulatory environments, and so forth. So with that, I'm going to pass the baton to my colleague, Chris Kanan, who's going to demo some common use cases for Teamcenter. So Chris, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Doug. So I'm going to be talking about Teamcenter DRM, and that's the solution we're offering. And what that is this Teamcenter Digital Rights Management, and it's an extension to Siemens Teamcenter to provide Teamcenter with the capability to do digital rights. So digital rights management provides a persistent control of access to and uses of digital information regardless of where it exists. So we can actually protect your documents inside of Teamcenter, and we also protect those documents as they leave Teamcenter or the enterprise. So I'm going to start looking at Teamcenter, and this is what you have today with Teamcenter without NexLabs. You will have users that are actually creating documents, CAD models, specifications, that sort of thing, and depositing them into Teamcenter, which is your source of record for that sort of thing. Then you have Teamcenter users that are actually accessing the data to do their job. But when that user needs to share those documents, those artifacts to IP, with others outside of Teamcenter, the data is largely unprotected and you have no downstream control or access of that data or those files. And that's where actually NexLabs fits in. We actually fill that gap and we provide the security that you're looking for, delivering global IP protection regardless of where the data exists, inside the Teamcenter or outside of Teamcenter. So now I'm going to talk about the typical use cases. There are 4 categories. The largest one that most of our customers actually come to us for is supplier collaboration. And that's where they're sharing documents or CAD models with supply chain partners. That could be a machine shop, that sort of thing. Another big category is global collaboration. That's when you have engineering teams that are geography separated, and we can actually provide secure transmissions of their CAD models as they send them back and forth. Product collaboration, we see that a lot with the larger aerospace companies because they're usually multiple companies working on the same project. So Boeing and Northrop Grumman as an example. And then there are employee situations in which you need to share data with employees who are out in the field, and NexLabs will protect that data as it's being shared. Okay, now I'm going to actually start showing you the product a little bit more. We're going to do a walkthrough or demonstration. And to start with our product, that's Digital Rights Management for Teamcenter, you have to start by classifying a file, and that's actually a Siemens Teamcenter capability. And what we mean by that is you're going to select their properties and actually assign values to them. This is a screenshot of that being done. And all I'm doing is editing. I'm going to select the part. I'm going to edit the properties of that part. And for example, I'm looking at IP classification, and I'm going to set that to secret or super secret or the default that Teamcenter has. You more than likely are using an automated approach to this via a workflow or something like that. But I'm just showing the manual process. And my point is this is a prerequisite to using our system. You have to have these attributes set up. Then you can start protecting the file. So the next step is you select the file you want to protect. And by the way, I'm showing you the manual process. I'll be going over the automated process that are available after this. And what you do is you select the file and you right-click on it. And you'll notice you have some NexLabs option here. And there's a protect or remove protection. You have that option because NexLabs actually integrated with Teamcenter. We have a plugin that we put in Teamcenter to give Teamcenter this additional capability. And that's how you apply the protection. I also want to make note that when you apply protection to an assembly, all the sub-assemblies and parts are also protected. And now I'm going to point out what just happened when you actually protect a part. And that's step 3. The files are actually sent to NexLabs solution, and that's what's being shown on the top here. myfile.prt is a part file. And we send it to a server called TcDRM. So that's part of the NexLabs solution. And TcDRM is going to take that file, it's going to apply the protection, and the file is sent back to Teamcenter where it's actually stored. Now let's talk about that protected file. What is that file and how do we protect it? We do several different things. The first thing we do is we actually take the original file. That could be your CAD model, it could be a PDF or Word document. We're actually going to encrypt the content. Then we're going to envelope the file, and it will now have the extension NXL. And inside the file, we're going to actually place some metadata. These are actually called the resource attributes. And those are the Teamcenter attributes or the classify attributes that we just talked about. So if you recall, I showed you we were using IP classification. If you use IP classification, actually that value gets stored inside the document as the metadata. now what I want to point out to you is I did the manual approach in how you actually protect and classify a file. There are the automated approaches too. There's the workflow-based protection. That's more than likely what you're going to be using most of the time. Workflow is part of the Siemens Teamcenter. So as an example, we can put trigger points in the workflow in which the file should be protected. For example, when you have a release, as soon as that file or model is release is finalized, then you can actually apply the protection if that's what you want to do. Another option is actually to use a bulk or batch protection. This is an expand line tool, and we can actually protect many files at once. This is typically used when we first set up the system. We're going to actually apply protection to a large amount of files to get you to the state that you want to be. Another use for bulk or batch is maybe at the end of the day. Let's suppose your engineers are done for the day. You can actually run the batch process, and you can protect the files at that point in time. Okay, now that we have a protected file, remember it's now inside the Teamcenter. I'm going to take that file, I'm going to send it externally, and it could be the case where you actually send it to the supplier. So the OEM is actually sending that part to the supplier. Realize that part file now has this extension NXL, and because of that, only the NextLabs solution can open up that file. And also because of that, let's suppose that file doesn't reach the supplier. Let's suppose it ends up somewhere it's not supposed to be. That's actually okay from a security point of view because it's actually protected regardless of where that file is. So the supplier now received the file, and they're going to open the file. And to do that, they can actually select the file, they right-click on it, and you'll get the TcDRM option. Remember, that's our server that's actually doing the work for the solution. And from the TcDRM option, you actually select View File. And the file is launched in the viewer. In this case, this is the speedboat. You saw the speedboat part file that in the previous slide. And you now can look at the file. Next thing I want to show you is, well, let's talk about how did this work. First, the user is already logged into the TcDRM desktop client, so that part I didn't show you, but that's a prerequisite. By being logged in, the NextLabs system or TcDRM actually knows who that person is. They will know if that person has authorization to open up the file. They also collect attributes about that person, like who does that person work for, what department are they in, do they have a security clearance, and that sort of thing. And they run a query to the NextLabs server TcDRM, and a policy is a exercise. The policy will decide, can that person open up the file? Then once they open it, what permissions or rights do they have? Can they print the file? Can they view the file? Can they edit? So we can actually control those rights as well. And that's what we mean by digital rights. So now I'm going to talk about file permissions. These are the digital rights. So if you're wondering, well, what rights do I have with this file? You can actually check it in a similar fashion. You click on the file, go to TcDRM option, and then choose File Info. And when you do that, you're presented with another screen, and they'll tell you a little bit about the file. First thing I want to point out, you won't have access to the screen if you do not have access to the file. But if you do, we're going to get some additional information. You'll start out with the name of the file, its size, that sort of stuff. But and then we have define rights. So we start with IP classification. If you recall, that was just my example. We use IP classification from Teamcenter. It is now part of the file, and this particular file has that set of secrets. Some other common attributes are maybe a project ID. If I were to use a project ID, that would actually show up here, and I'll tell you what that is. Below that are actually the permissions or the rights that individual has with this file. In this case, this person has the ability to view, edit, print, reshare, and save the file, save as file, to change the name. And that will vary depending upon what rights that individual has. If another person tries to open up the file with different rights, they'll get a different screen. Okay, so file permissions. So we know what those are, and how are they applied? And they're actually options that are presented on the viewer that we saw in the previous screen. And there'll be icons at the top. So this person has the ability to reshare, save as, print. They can get the file info, which is the previous screen. If you recall this one, that's what that is. and they can also edit the particular part. So I'll go through this briefly. Reshare gives the ability of that user to actually reshare the file with somebody else downstream. That's going to be a common scenario with suppliers because they also have suppliers, and you as an OEM won't necessarily know who those other suppliers are. So if you want, you can allow your supplier, your first-tier supplier, to reshare the document downstream. It's a capability you need to decide, or permission you need to decide if you want to give them or not. When a reshare occurs, and we'll see this somewhat more clearly later on, we actually are doing audit records and we're maintaining what's actually happened with the file. So when you look at those audit records or reports, which I'm going to show you, you'll see that, oh, somebody reshared the file, this is who they shared it with, and you'll have a record of that. So let me move on. I want to talk about editing. So let's edit the file. And when you select that edit icon, what happens next is actually the file native application is launched. This happens to be an NX file. So what I'm showing here is NX is actually launched. And because this is a user has the edit permissions, that's why NX is launched. If it were CATIA, CATIA would be launched. If it were Creole, Creole would be launched, that sort of thing. And the user is now allowed to edit the file. And they can actually save the file. When they do save the file, it still remains as a protected file. In other words, it has the extension NXL. It is still, envelope has the encrypted, the document is still encrypted, it still has the metadata. So the question comes up, how did that work? And what we're going to point out to you is we actually have installed a plugin into NX called RMX, Rights Management Extension. And that plugin gives NX the ability to open a protected file, and it also allows or lets or demands that NX actually saves that as a protected file. So NexLabs provides RMX for many applications, not just NX, but we also provide it for Word, Creole, CATIA, SolidWorks, and so forth. And we actually cover all the applications that are typically used in a Teamcenter scenario. Okay, now I want to talk about policies. If you recall, when somebody is opening up a file or getting information about a file, they're actually making a connection to the TcDRM server. And on that TcDRM server, we actually have a policy that's being executed to determine, can that person open the file? And if so, what rights do they have? Can they view and print? So here's the use case as an example. Allow engineer working for company Acme on Project X with citizenship U.S. secret clearance, access to classified data in the United States from January 1st to 31st, and they're allowed to view and print the document. Without going into detail, what I want to point out is we are using ABAC, Attribute-Based Access Control, and that allows you to actually perform these security scenarios that I'm showing here. It's quite in-depth, and that gives the additional capability that Siemens Teamcenter may not have. When you implement the policy, we actually have a GUI, and I'm showing you part of it on the right-hand side. As an example, we start out with the resource. That's the document itself, and we say, is this document classified as secret? If yes, then the policy continues to move on. The policy is actually determining if you can open up the document. So the next thing we do is this person a member of Acme? Is that the company works for? That's the requirement here. And this is a partial screenshot. We keep going down until we meet all these requirements that I'm showing here. At the bottom of the policy, and that's what's shown on the lower right-hand side in yellow, is where we assign the rights. So what we're saying is if that person does have access to this file, what rights do they have? And of course they have view, print, share, save as, edit. We also provide a watermark capability. And what the watermark is actually, and I did not show that in the previous slide, but we can put a watermark to that viewer. And the watermark would actually ID the person who's actually opened up the file. We can also put the expiration date from January 1st to January 31st and that sort of thing. And trying to scroll. Okay. Reports and audits. So as I mentioned, as the system is running, we're actually collecting audits, and that audit is the details of what is happening. And here's an example audit report. So I have a person named John Tyler. If you look at the bottom, he was trying to protect a document through the web application, and here's a date, and he was allowed to do that. Above that, he's trying to view a document. He was allowed to do that. Above that, he's trying to decrypt the document. That's one of the rights that we did not show on this previous screen, but if you're allowed to decrypt the document, that means you're removing protection. He was denied that because he doesn't have that right. He was also trying to download the document. He did not have that right as well, so it shows a deny. So you will have a record of all the users and what they're trying to do with the documents, whether they're denied or they're allowed access, and what they're trying to do with it. So that's the kind of reporting capability we actually have. And it is now time for questions and answers.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that, Chris. Oh, sorry, I cut you off there. You were going to say something?
No, I was just going to ask you, how do you want to handle questions and answers? So.
Yeah, I've been kind of like, curating it as we're going along here. A couple people actually asked a similar question, so you could probably knock them off with the two birds with one stone. But, somebody asked, what if I need to deny access to files that have already been sent to our suppliers?
Yes, so that's actually pretty easy to do. If you recall, I was talking about the policy. So if you have a change in a scenario in which you need to deny access versus allow them to access, you would actually go to that policy engine or policy studio, and you can make the change. Maybe you have a project that has expired or been canceled. You can change it to expire on a certain day, and nobody has access to that project going forward. So we can have that kind of dynamic control by changing the policy itself.
Okay, got it.
And
then, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was waiting for the next question. Go ahead.
Okay. Somebody asked, can I send the files to other people, and will they still be secure? Kind of a broad question, but.
Yeah, no, it is a broad question. We get that all the time, actually. Again, the file is secure, actually, regardless of where it goes, and that's the nature of digital rights management. So as the file leaves the system, it can be sent to this person or that person, this country or that country. It's always secure. It's always in that envelope. And you can only open it if you go through the NextLabs system. And then if you only have the rights to open it, or excuse me, the permissions to open it, you're authorized to open it. And then, of course, we assign the rights. Can you view or print or that sort of thing? So the file's always secure regardless of where it is.
Got it. And I think you might have answered this during the course of your demo, but somebody's asking what types of files or files can you protect?
Yeah, so we have a lot of them, and I can provide a list. So the type of files we protect are, we can actually protect any file at all. So it doesn't matter about the file type. But when it comes time to opening them, particularly editing them, we have a list of native applications that we actually support. So if you recall, I was talking about NX. NX has that plugin so that you can open up a protected file and you can edit it. So we cover all the major applications that a Teamcenter user would have, and I'll name a small list. There's a bigger list of this, but certainly CAD models for NX, for CATIA, for Fuel, SolidWorks we support. We also support other files like PDF, Word, I think Excel spreadsheets are supported as well. So we covered all the major files that a typical Teamcenter user will probably use.
Okay, got it. If anybody has any last-minute questions, feel free to just type it into the Q&A box and chat room. The chat box. Otherwise, Chris, you can go to the next slide as people type that in.
Sure.
Just wanted to quickly go over if you're interested in getting some more info on NextLabs and our solutions for Teamcenter or even other applications as well that we support, feel free to check out our website or shoot us an email. Someone, especially Chris, will get back to you right away. You can also request a demo of other use cases because I know we only had 30 minutes today, but our Teamcenter DRM solution can actually cover several different use cases, but we wanted to at least cover off the ones that are the main ones that we see in the marketplace. I encourage you guys to check out our webpage on Siemens Rights Management. And then just let me pause a little bit to give you guys an additional minute or two to submit any last-minute questions you might have.
Yeah, and this is Chris. I want to say these webinars typically are hard to be interactive, and I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions. Since you have an email down there, feel free to contact me afterwards, and we can set up a one-on-one or a meeting, or I'll answer your questions there. I know webinars are hard to get questions answered, so we're aware of that.
All right, Chris. I don't see any other additional questions from the audience. So,
okay.
But as Chris mentioned, if anybody comes up with a question that didn't pop up immediately, feel free to reach out to us. Like I said, we'll be sending you a copy of the recording of this webinar, and you know, we thank you guys for attending today's webinar and hope to see you on future webinars as well. And Chris, thank you very much for your time and the demo.
Yep.
We hope to see
You're
you
welcome.
guys